we're good.
All right.
All right.
So I am once again, it's a big pleasure to introduce these two special people together. Tim, I don't even know where to start with you. And I mean, the fact that we can't see your face adds even more to the ghost persona that you are. We stumbled across each other at the top of Colombia and a really random twist of events. And we've developed a great friendship since then. And how wonderful was it the moment when I didn't think I was ever going to go back to coaching and working with athletes. After a couple of weeks of us two going back and forth, and I finally asked you what you did for a job, you were like, well, I'm kind of a tennis coach. I think that was basically the way you introduced it. Could you go into a little bit who you are, mate? Introduce yourself, especially for Mike, and then for whoever else is wasting their time listening to us free rant on.
Yeah, I mean, we met in Colombia. I basically, long story short, I got rid of all my shit in the States. I wanted to spend time raising my kids. I've been a coach. I was a player first, not a very good player, just a good enough player to become a coach, maybe. And then I coached for a long time, and then I quit coaching. Or I thought I quit coaching and took my kids around, but everywhere I went, I was still coaching. There was always players, always courts, always something. So I just sort of kept my finger in it. I kept reading about it. It's an interest of mine. And then we met and talked about it, and that's where we are at this moment.
For sure. But
Sounds pretty modest.
Yeah, I think we're kind of skipping over a few little bits and bobs, mate. Huh? What was some of the, Tim, go into more like, I mean, when you said you were coaching for a long time, who was you coaching? How was you coaching? Was it privately? Was it as part of a facility? I mean, go into more in depth in your history a little bit.
Well, it's difficult to explain the story. I was a college player, and before I turned pro, my coach in college, the guy who recruited me to go there, asked me to give him some lessons. And so as I was teaching my college coach, I thought, wow, I kind of like this. And then, I don't know if you know anything about tennis, but when you generally turn pro, nobody drafts you in tennis. So you basically say, okay, I'm pro now, which means you can, accept prize money without endangering your amateur status. So yeah, it's a pretty egocentric thing to say if you think about it. I'm a professional player, but I was never really good enough to make a bunch of money. So when you went from event to event, they had pro-ams, or they offered chances for you to get lessons to make money. And I'd play the pro-am, I'd teach a few people. And as time went on, I enjoyed it a lot. So when I finally got tired of starving, trying to play tennis for a living, I thought, wow, I like coaching, so I'll coach some people. And along the way, there were guys I knew on the circuit, and so I would coach them. And there were no big names, but when you're dealing with a professional, it's a lot different than dealing with an amateur, because with a professional, you've got about 5 minutes to make a difference. And they can never leave the court worse than when they walked on it. So you can't be fucking around with their technique or anything. That's completely forbidden. And so I would just come up with these, I would look at a guy, I would sort of diagnose him like, this guy just worries too much. So I would just eliminate the worry if I could. Maybe I'd ask him before, I'd coach him in a few practice matches, and I'd just come up to him and say, like, before every point, what are you going to do right now? And bringing him back to the present, right, eliminates the worry of the future. And so they'd always play better in that scenario. And that's kind of how I got started.
Yeah.
And where did that take you?
Well, so then I would move around, and another guy said, do you want to run this public facility? So I ran this big public facility, and then I got tired of doing that. So I built a club of some partners, and I built a club in California, a big place, like 20 acres. And we opened up just as the market was collapsing, the 2008 financial crisis. And so we basically ate shit right there.
Yeah.
And then a corporation came in and bought the club. It's a beautiful place. And they had deeper pockets, and they came in and bought the club and said, well, would you stay and do this stuff? Which I did, but I didn't really like the corporate atmosphere too much. The tennis wasn't that big. And simultaneously, my wife had a cardiac arrest and basically died for 20 minutes.
Tim, this is a huge part of your story. I mean, please, can you like sort of not relive it, but sort of go into details about, that moment there for you? Because I think that was a big turning point in your life, right?
Yeah, every day. So life is a funny thing in this sense. Every day is pretty much like the last until it's not. And it's that story that Talib tells about the turkey and the butcher, right? 364 days. The butcher shows up every day with something nice for the turkey, some food. And the turkey like equates that with, consistency. Like, this guy's a nice guy. It's the 365th day he shows up with the axe and the turkey's not ready for it. So we go to bed one night, just like every other night, and I hear this loud crash, and I really wasn't going to check it out, but I don't know, I just did for some reason, and the kids were coming out of their room. And so my wife, she's 39 years old, she's laying on the floor dead. And like, it's impossible to imagine. It really is. Like, I as I'm telling the story, I kind of feel like I'm making it up. It's like it wasn't real. But she's there and she's dead and you don't know what to do. It's like I have never in my life felt more alone. And I started giving CPR. I sent the kids to call 911. You do all these things, but we live pretty remote. It took them like 11 minutes to get there. And I know it was 11 minutes because I had to call the 911 operators on the phone with me, still waiting, and occasionally encouraging me. And man, giving CPR for 11 minutes is a extreme exercise. And so the paramedics come and, they put the paddles on her a few times and there's nothing. And they cart her out of there, take her to the hospital, and we sit around and sort of clean up. And I'm telling the kids, like, I know she's not going to make it. This doesn't happen. And if she does make it, like, what's that going to look like? Because people don't do so good after 20 minutes of no pulse, right? So we get to the hospital and I walk in and I know they're going to tell me that it's over. I'm just trying to figure out, like, what do I do so the kids don't freak out? And we get in there and they're like, well, her heart started again. And that started, and so the doctor's like, she's still super sick, but her heart started again. And she comes out of it, like, with no damage. Well, no more damage than she already had. But with no damage. And her cardiologist, the guy's about ready to retire. He's been doing it for 35 years. And he tells me, he says, I have never in my life seen anything like this. I don't even know how to describe it to you. And, so being coaches, we track things. We formally or informally, we sort of take note of what works and what doesn't work and how that goes for people. So I ask him, I go, is there any tracking you have? And he goes, dude, you're off the map. So, but after that, she has a heart attack. They put a stent in, but it was because she was on blood thinners. It was a bare metal stent and it occluded. So it was a minor heart attack, but a heart attack nonetheless. So they had to put another stent in. And we get to this point where the guy says, look, if you want to do something, if there's something you want to do, I suggest you get to it right now. And so, it just seemed at that moment, making a mortgage payment and kids going to school and all that just seemed stupid to me. So we got rid of everything and took off. And now I find out the whole purpose of the journey was just to meet Alex.
Bro, how long ago was this? How long ago until you packed up and then you all, you lived in your truck and trailer?
It was about 6 years ago. So it took her about 8 or 9 months to get healthy enough to go. And like I've told you before, when we left, she was easily on a dozen medication. And over time, within the first 6 months, she didn't need them anymore, a lot of them. And so I developed this theory, which I think is largely true. We're seeing it to be borne out true now, that specifically the lifestyle in the United States, this high stress, high speed lifestyle is toxic to people. When we got away from that, she just did better. The stress was gone, the need for medication was gone, the blood pressure went down, and so we just kept going.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then, I mean, you know, you spent, if I remember correctly, about 5 years just sort of living on the beaches in Central America at the same time as raising your kids too. And one of the things that you'd mentioned was, you know, you wanted to help your kids grow up. I mean, did you sort of make this decision to pack up your bags and leave, you know, from the shock of this event of what happened to Malia, or was it already something in the back of your head? Was you already thinking, this is bullshit, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And so I sort of decided, well, I figured that we lived on a ranch. We had a nice big house and a ranch and everything. And I had coached a lot of kids from very successful families, and they just don't fight. And my theory was they don't fight because everything's given to them. And it's not that you have to fight a game, it's that you have to want to suffer a little bit to make it happen. I mean, the dividing line between players is very fine. And so oftentimes in my experience, it was just a higher tolerance for pain that made the difference. And I had sort of convinced myself that this comfortable lifestyle was a socially accepted form of child abuse. And so I would take them camping for long periods of time, Yosemite or in the Sierra Nevada mountains for 3-4 weeks, and they'd sleep on the ground. And we'd fish for food, and so when she had the heart attack, all this came together. I was frustrated with making mortgage payments and not getting anywhere. The kids weren't doing well, and they were getting good grades, but they weren't developing the way I wanted them to develop. We wanted to explore different places. We never had the time. And you know that your kids are going to grow up to be pretty much just like you anyway. And so if you want them to be brave, well, I mean, the thing that's hard about being a parent is that you have to be the person you want them to be. So we sat down and we just said, look, let's just sell everything and let's take off for a year or 6 months. And the rule was nobody can complain, or we're not going to change for 6 months. You can complain all you want, but nothing's going to change for 6 months because it's a pretty big lifestyle change. And after 3-4 months, it was pretty obvious that everybody was super happy. So we never had that conversation in 6 months. And after 10-11 months in the States, we thought, well, let's go to Mexico. And then we drove through Mexico, and then it was Guatemala, and then we just kept going. And now I'm stuck in Chile.
So when all this was going down, were you working at all? What were you doing for work when you were making this transition?
I was working at the club as we were deciding what to do. And then after that, when I sold my house, we made a little bit of money, so we just sort of lived on that. And you'd be amazed at how little you spend. I mean, I was spending easy $8-9 grand a month in the United States, easy.
Mm-hmm.
We lived on the road. We lived on the road very comfortably for $1,500 a month, and that was without even really trying to scrimp. And it slowly, your mind rewrites itself over time. Like when you're in the middle of the rat race, you never feel like you're doing enough because you don't even notice your velocity because everybody's going at the same speed or faster. But when you step out and you get used to doing nothing, your mind rewrites itself, and it starts to become very selective about the things it takes on and the things it discards, and it's really a dramatically life-altering experience, I would have to say.
How was it perceived by, the other members of your family, the people around you at work and stuff like that, when you said, you wanted to pack up everything and bugger off?
Oh, you know how that goes. So my parents are dead. My brother already knows I'm a nut, so he just accepts things the way they are. But everybody else, I was a dropout. I mean, see, it went like this. When I was talking to people and they understood what happened, you'd say like, I think I'm going to sell my house and take off for a while. And they say, oh, that's great, dude, that you should do that for sure, because, that's the way it needs to be. This life is crazy. But when you actually do it, you see, when they agree with you because they don't believe it. But when you actually do it, it presents a conundrum for them. There's no way you can do what you're doing without indicting their lifestyle. And the way people think is, there's no way they have a choice. Either you're crazy or they are. And they're not going to rewrite their narrative to accommodate for the fact that you're making sense. So they write you off as crazy or a dropout or couldn't handle the pressure. And that's exactly what happened. So to 99% of the people, I fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah. And what about, the kids? I mean, for them, they were in school, like they must have had their friends and their different social groups. I mean, how did they take the news at the beginning? And then what sort of, development did you see them go through? Because, I mean, I actually met your kids before I met you. And I actually met Kyla, who is going to be she already is a badass. I mean, how old must she have been then? 12?
No, man, she was 9 when you met her.
Oh shit. Okay. So, we bumped into each other on the beach and she was asking me a question, in near perfect Spanish, with a slight American accent about where the surf shop was. And then, her two brothers walked past and then, I could hear the Californian in her, she spoke to them and I went back and forth a little bit with Kyla and she said, you should meet my dad. You would like my dad. He would like you. Come and meet him. And I was like, all right. And then, you interrupted my surf session. Not that I was getting any better anyway, but, I think what was that? The first of many 3-hour conversations, day in, day out.
Yeah.
And, they were great. And I mean, I didn't have any idea what you did for a job or anything like that, but I think it was about for 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. Like we just were going back and forth about, life and philosophy, and it was such an enriching experience. But I've diverted anyway. Your kids, how did they take it at the beginning, and then what did you see change in them as time's gone on?
For them, it was easy because we've always been a pretty close family. So we did more stuff together than they did with friends. And the transition was really no problem. Plus, I mean, who complains about not having to go to school every morning? So, we would go, I mean, we spent 2 months in Yellowstone. Nobody does that, right? I mean, we would drive to Tetons and back to Yellowstone. We saw bears, we saw wolves, we saw crazy stuff. I mean, things that people never see because they're always in a hurry or always passing through or grabbing the snapshot. I think I told you, but we watched these wolves. There were these wolf watchers there. And so the wolves never really come too close to people, but they had these long, like long scope binoculars. And the wolves are all tagged with radio collars in Yellowstone. So we go in the morning over there, and the wolf people, the wolf watchers, had gotten to know the kids. And so when they saw us and something was happening, they called us over. And so these two wolves and 2 bears, the 2 bears had dragged down a bison. And the wolves were running in and grabbing a bite of bison, and the bear would chase it off. And the other wolf would come in, and the other bear would chase it off. And they were playing this game for like, I don't know, an hour. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my life. And then, right in the middle of it all 4 of them just lay down and take a nap. I mean, you're like, what? But yeah, they're like, I don't know, maybe 50 yards apart from each other. They just all laid down and took a nap. And so we went off somewhere for a few hours. and came back and stopped by to see if the wolves were still there. And we talked to the wolf people, like, yeah, no, they're still sleeping. Like, you know, it's things like that that they were able to see, and it changes, it just adds so much, you know, to the tapestry of how you view the world. And it was like that over and over, and every place we went, the people we met, the stories we heard, the things they did, that, you know, I mean, it was so much more valuable in my perspective than school. And it's true, there's no doubt they're behind in math and some other bullshit at school. But it's much easier to, I think, to learn math than it is to teach somebody at 18 to be a good person. And that was my primary objective all along.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's always that argument, isn't there, between, you know, what's real wisdom? Is it something that you can sort of repeat out of a book, or is it something that you actually understand because you've lived through it through experience? And I mean, no doubt those kids saw things that they would never, ever have had the chance to see if they didn't leave, you know, and go on this trip. So, I mean, it's going to be incredible to see their growth. And I mean, you know, like even the sort of endeavors that they want to get themselves into now, you know, it's really quite inspiring to see it. So, I mean, what's been, you know, as the journey's gone on, what's been like, you know, from the beginning as you started to go out, what was one of the first key moments that you felt that this was definitely the right decision to drive this family and lead them into this sense of sort of becoming sort of independent? Where was your first big challenge and test?
Oh man. Well, first off, when I sold the house, we spent the last night, everything's out of the house, everything's out. And we spent the last night in this great room that we had, where we had made every meal together and watched movies and done all this stuff. And we had one mattress left, and we're all laying around the ground, going to leave early the next morning. And I swear to you, I was certain at that moment that I had fucked everybody's life forever. I was like, I was laying there and I was thinking to myself, I remember, I will never forget, I'm like, wow, you have done some crazy, stupid shit in your life, but this you will never recover from. So I started with that in mind, like, there's just, like, you're fucked up. And then we picked up the trailer, and, you know, we're in Arizona. So, you know, Phoenix, Arizona is like this huge metropolis. And there's camping inside of the city, and kind of like South America, but different, you know, like big campgrounds and stuff, and they're hard to find. So by the time we got the trailer fitted to the truck, it's like 9 o'clock at night. We get lost going to the campground. We finally get there, and the campground's full, and they direct us to some other place. We get in there, and then we're trying to set up this trailer, which we've never set up before, which took like an hour. And we're all just like yelling at each other. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm just going to kill these fucking people. And it's miserable, right? It's completely miserable. And it's only just a few days afterwards, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, dude. And so when you when you start at that point, there's only up to go. And we started to get away from it all, and we ran into some really interesting people, and we started hearing stories, and you watch the kids handle themselves differently, handle situations differently. You watch them. When we were in the Grand Canyon, camping in the United States is impossible in national parks because everything is reservation based. And we were living the exact opposite lifestyle of that. We never knew where we were going to be. And so we'd send Wyatt up in the morning, and we got a spot in there, and then we would send Wyatt up in the morning, and he found a way to get a park ranger, which is, you know, these guys are state cops. They're not easy people to deal with. He found a way to get the park ranger to like give him a spot every day. You know, sometimes he would even rearrange other people just so we didn't have to move. And as you watch that happen, you go like, wow, that's really that's unique. Like he was, what was he at the time? He was maybe 14 years old at the time. You know, that's not common for a 14-year-old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so when you project, you know, when you're as a coach, you're always looking at snapshots of people, or not people so much, snapshots of the moment, and you attribute like an up arrow to it or a down arrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So you're watching them, and they maybe fail a test or something, and you can't help but project that forward, and you go like, oh, that's not good. You know, that's just, we're not getting anywhere. But as I watched that happen, and I took this snapshot, and I thought like, man, 10 years from now, that's just huge. The ability to do that is just huge.
And then you start thinking about all of the negotiations that your daughters had to do with all of the local police in South America every time you got yourself into a bit of trouble. I remember you saying that you used to just throw Kyla at people whenever you had problems, and then she would just melt their hearts, talk your way out of it.
Oh yeah, I got pictures of her. I don't ever post them because people are, especially in America, have this problem with, you know, they're very anti-gun and everything, and it's a little tone deaf, I think, sometimes. But almost with every military we run into, they strap a gun around Kyla and put a hat on her, and we take a picture of them all together.
Mike, you would love his daughter. She is the biggest badass you've ever met. I mean, you know, you see it with the two boys, but for this young girl to have like grown up and just seen this, I mean, she is so brave, huh, Tim? It's just, it's incredible. Like the level of confidence on her is just, it oozes out.
So you guys have been living this lifestyle now for what, 6 years?
Yeah.
And so what do you, are you back and forth with coaching at all, or do you get pulled back in every now and then to make a quick buck so you could head back out? How do you sustain this?
Yeah. So whenever we go to a place where there's a court, I go to work. Yeah, always. And some places are more open to it than it's easier in some places than others. And everybody here, I'm sure you guys run into this with what you do, but everybody here runs a system. And most of what they're running down here is what's called the Spanish system. And it's really just a bunch of drills. They've been around forever, repackaged in a certain way. And so I always try and grab some people that nobody else believes in, and just show them how quickly you can get people over hurdles without any of that bullshit. And once you pull that trick a few times, people start listening.
So how long will you stay in a particular area to be able to pull something like this off, and then make some money and be on your way? Do you guys just chill out in a spot for a month to 2 months? How's it all work?
Yeah, sometimes 2-3 months in a spot. We've been in places in Argentina for 4 months, and it depends on, you know, all the variables, whether the family likes the spot, how open the club is to what I have to say, how much tennis there is. The kids like playing tennis too, if they can play. We've been to places where they put them on a tournament team, and they drive them around. Like in Argentina, they drove them to a few places and they played tournaments. They had a blast.
And I think this is a good moment to sort of really dive deep though into your philosophy for coaching, Tim, because, you know, it's refreshing, and I think it's going to be something that, you know, the majority of people that are going to end up listening to this, it's not even within their perception to understand the sort of core foundations of it. So, you know, maybe you want to start sharing about how many times you have to bounce the ball before it serves, and how to, you know, how to hold the racket, you know, and how to swing it and stuff like that. You mind sharing your secret formula, your 10-step plan?
Yeah, my secret formula: pray. Yeah. No, I mean, this is as you know, it's totally different for every person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with, well, I mean, for me, it just starts with looking at, you have to get to know, like you have to try and see the person as they see themselves. That's to me the beginning. Everybody jumps in and tries to change people, and you know you're not going to change anybody. We should all know that by now. You're, yeah, can you still hear me all right?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
we got you.
Okay. Yeah, so you look at somebody, for example, here's what most people do. They look at somebody, they go, oh, you worry too much, and you should hit the ball with this grip, and everything else, you know, you got to do these things. But that, I mean, that doesn't do anything for anybody. You're not going to change a person. You're not going to change a warrior to a non-warrior. That's impossible. And if you take somebody who's been using a specific grip for 20 years and try and change it, you're just going to fuck them up. They're going to be miserable. It takes as long to undo something as it took to do it. So at one point, when I was teaching, I taught like everybody else. You know, we were. It's all about faults and fixes, right? The diagnosis. Well, here, Alex, you missed this shot because of this. And then Alex says, wow, I didn't even know I was thinking that. Well, yeah, of course you were. And I noticed that, like, I could take all my people and they could answer any question about tennis, any tennis related question. They knew stuff about physics that I told them. We talked about entropy. We talked about the Pareto principle, you know, all this kind of shit, right? But none of them were getting any better or any worse faster than people who weren't taking lessons. That was really the problem. And it started to really bother me, you know, because the money was good, but I really didn't feel like I was fulfilling my duty to them. And you'd start to ask, like, okay, so, you know, these basic questions came to my mind that I never really bothered to ask before. Like, okay, what are we doing? Like, what's the job of a coach? Well, with pros, it's really easy. They need to win more, right? But it actually isn't that easy, because what I decided was, after talking to, I don't know, 1,000 people or more, what everybody wants, the pros included, is to have more fun. That's what they really want. They equate that fun with winning. That's what people think. If I get better, if I hit the ball better, I'll get better. If I get better, I'll win more. If I win more, I'll have more fun, and people will accept me. Okay. If that was true, you look up to the pros, right? They're the best. Are they having fun? Well, when we think about fun, we think about them taking a trophy with a big smile and everything, but only one guy does that. And if you look at him when he was playing 20 minutes before, does it look like he was having the time of his life in the middle of the match? So around this time, I ran into this guy. You know, I was experimenting with my method. And so one thing I did to take a step back is I recorded all these strokes, good looking strokes, and I mean the shit that gives you nightmares. And I had all my colleagues come by who were telling me how important strokes were. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to watch this video. I'm going to push pause when they hit the ball. And you tell me if the ball went in or out. And we couldn't do it, right? You think about that for a second. We couldn't predict when they hit the ball. And what was even more telling is we erred on the side of making it for the good looking strokes and on the side of not making it for the ugly strokes. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So there's a built-in bias in the whole thing, right? And then I thought, well, we don't offer style points. This isn't figure skating. So really, what fucking difference does it make what the stroke looks like? Well, there's this belief that better strokes are more consistent. Okay? So then I started thinking about what difference does consistency make? And then I got down to this principle of the game, which is basically when it comes to tennis, and I think every sport shares a similar bedrock. When it comes to tennis, the guy who puts the most balls in play wins every time. It really is that simple. But we weren't teaching it that way. We were like teaching it backwards. Hit the ball like this. Why? Well, you'll put the ball more and play more. So then I started to think, what should I do? How do I get these people to understand that? What exactly do I do with them on the court? And I just started letting them play. And they started to change. When I stopped telling them what to do, giving them prescriptions, right? They started to change. They started to change. They started to have more fun. And it was about this time when I was questioning it all that I read an article in a psychology paper about a guy named Fred Shoemaker who was giving golf lessons without teaching. And he happened to live in California, so I tracked him down. Right? And we talked, and basically his whole point was that when you give somebody a prescription, a how-to, they become more obsessed with living up to the prescription than they do with doing the thing. In other words, the prescription becomes the whole point of doing it. The thing that they hoped would make the thing easier becomes the point of doing the thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they lose all track of play. They lose all track of fun, and they're just trying to work out like a robot, just execute a script. And so he did this drill that really blew my mind. He took like 6 golfers, and he said, okay, everybody hit a drive. Puts the ball down, they swing. There are 6 of the worst looking golf swings you've ever seen in your life right there. And this guy charges a lot of money. And you're like, and I mean, these were horrible golf swings. Then he says, okay, we're going to do it again. This time, he takes the ball away. There's no ball. And what I want you to do is release the club at the end, throw it as far as you can down the fairway. Right? So they all do it. You've never seen more athletic golf swings. Every one of those people hit the ball just like a golfer. They didn't hit the ball, but they swung just like a golfer. Right? And his point was, this is what prescriptions, this is what how-tos do to people. And that just flipped a switch in my head. I needed somebody to tell me I wasn't completely batshit crazy. And after that, I just stopped telling people how to do stuff. I would tell them how to orient their body. What you learn when you play a sport for a long time is orientation and where to stand sometimes for certain things. But I stopped asking people why they didn't do something and instead asked them why they did. Because when you ask them why they did do something, you're leaving open the possibility that they saw something that you didn't. And you're connecting them with their awareness. When you do it the other way around, when you say, why didn't you do this? You're insinuating they didn't see something that you did, and you remove them from their awareness. And Shoemaker's big point in the whole thing was that it's about people's awareness, not about our information. You can bounce information off people forever, and they can repeat it on a test, but they have no sensation of doing it. Like when you ride a bike, your parents, I'm sure, told you all kinds of stuff, but it wasn't until you were up on 2 wheels that you had the sensation, the awareness of balance. And that's really what we're doing. We're trying to get people up on 2 wheels. And so Shoemaker's point was, we're not putting the game inside of people. We're pulling it out of them.
Yeah, and what's so lovely about also this philosophy is you're not limiting someone's uniqueness to be expressed. You know what I mean? Like one of the big things you see about people is they try to copy everybody else. You know, I even see that with some of the clients that I work with. You know, they've read every single self-help book or every autobiography, and they're just looking for someone to tell them it's these 5 steps to happiness or these 5 steps to playing good. And that just doesn't exist. You know what I mean? When if they would just sort of, you know, almost step out of their own way and just become very, very serious and explore through them, you know, through their own sort of intuitions, you know, they might end up becoming, you know, the greatest ever just because they wasn't molded by, you know, some form of narrative or prescription or just from some sort of societal influence. So that's what I like the most about that. And I mean, also the golf swing is probably, what's that you told me once? The golf swing is the most written topic in any sports book or something like that?
It's the most studied motion in human history. There's 50,000 books at least written about the golf swing, and the average handicap remains unchanged.
You know, it's interesting that you take that approach. So one of my mentors, his name is Buddy Morris, and he always used to say, if you try to correct one thing at a time, you have an 85% success rate. Try to correct 2 things, it immediately drops to 37. Good luck with 3, right? You want to correct 3 things at once, you're fucked. So one of these things that I do is if there's something with running or some kind of, you know, change of direction or any kind of route running that my guys are doing, I'll make one suggestion. And I'll leave it at that. And I'll make sure that they understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. And then I leave them alone. And that's the only thing that we're going to focus on. And we don't even, and I don't even correct anything from there on, because in my eyes, it's, well, it takes about 24 to 48 hours for you to actually process anything that went in mentally to be able to process it physically. And then on top of that, there's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence. And those stages take thousands of reps. So if I make a suggestion or try to make an attempt to help you realize something, more cueing isn't necessarily going to do it. You need to figure it out for yourself. Does that make sense? Is it something on the same page as that?
Exactly the same. It is exactly the same. I mean, we have no way of knowing what anybody hears when we talk to them. Right?
Precisely.
That's the other complication. I say, okay, do X, Y, and Z, and they hear C, D, and F. And you don't know that, right? I mean, one of the problems is, I mean, this is the nice part about getting older and having experience, is you realize that this sensation you have of being the center of the universe, right, is an illusion. We all think we're the lead actor in our own play, and that everybody is a supporting actor, right? But everybody thinks the same thing. And one of the reasons we think that is because, well, first of all, when you look around, the whole world's going on around you all the time. But also, our feelings, our thoughts don't need interpretation. We understand exactly what we mean. But that's not true when everybody else talks. And it makes people feel less real, less understandable, if you understand the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And once you grasp that, when you realize how hard it is to understand, even somebody you know, right? Even somebody you lived with for 20 years, your wife says, well, here's what I think, Alex, you should have done this. And you're like, what do you exactly mean by that?
Yeah.
When you take that and you apply it to the instructions that you're giving to people, you can already see that it's just bound to be a clusterfuck. And limiting. If you say to somebody, hit a golf ball this way, well, that's one thing. But what if you take them and put them on the tee and say, get the ball in the hole in as few strokes as possible. I don't care how you do it. I mean, that's the game, right?
Yep.
This is the same. Mike, what discipline are you?
Whatever they pay me for.
Okay. Yeah. So you do like when you do route running, is it American football or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you take a guy and you go like, look, your job is just to get the ball from the quarterback. You know, it's not just running routes, because the route is one thing. He has a defender, that's another thing, but he also has to know if the quarterback's in trouble or not. Right?
Mhm.
He has to have a feel for everything that's going on. And so, you know, he can't run to the side of the field where somebody else is, but he can certainly modify things to make the quarterback's job easier. But if he's hell bent on making a perfect 90-degree turn at 10 yards, well, that's not the game.
It's going into this, you know, systematical approach to learning a skill by breaking it into little blocks and thinking that we start here and then we build up this block, this block, this block, this block, and then in the end we have this sort of perfect execution of skill. But it just doesn't appear that that's the right way things work. I mean, if we was to grab Roger Federer and tell him and ask him, you know, how did you make that, you know, backhand, he would probably say he doesn't know.
Yeah, it's even deeper than that. I think if we took Roger Federer and he went back to scratch, he started all over again, but this time he tried to mimic his successful self, he wouldn't make it.
Yeah, you'd be fucked. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rather than being free, you'd be in a box.
Right. Just like we are. Just like anybody who emulates it, right?
Yep.
But it's really hard. You think of the size of the industry that's based on mimicry. And it's not just sport. It's weekend business seminars and Tony Robbins and all these things. And I'm not criticizing any of it, because they're great speakers. And for sure, Tony Robbins is a great motivator. But I wonder if there's any tracking in terms of like what changes people really do make afterwards. Because the hardest thing is to mimic somebody else. I mean, it's impossible to do. When somebody says, I know why I'm successful, they're making it up in reverse. They're connecting dots that didn't connect when they were going forward. Right? Like Alex said, I bet you when any athlete on earth does anything, there was no thought when they were doing it. But later on, they're interviewed, and the interviewer says, hey, why did you do that? Well, now they make up a story, a narrative. Well, I did that because I noticed this guy was looking the other way and his body did this. And he didn't know any of that stuff at the time at all. But the damage of that is that we are listening to it and we think we're supposed to be noticing those things too.
Yep. Yeah, it's like in baseball. When I was younger, you would ask someone, "Hey, what pitch was that when you hit the home run?" So I don't fucking know. And then the coach says, "Well, you got to know what pitch you're swinging at." So then you have to start thinking about it, and then it starts becoming conscious. And then the home runs will come less frequently if you have to think about it all the time rather than see pitch, swing. I mean, there are guys in the majors, in the big leagues, that kind of go up there without an approach and are successful, rather than going up there and they say, if I know what's coming or if I have to think about it, then it's too stressful, and paralysis by analysis. It just doesn't happen for them. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Also,
well,
why some
I
of the
think
best athletes are not very clever dudes, you know. And also why a lot of really sort of intellectual academics are also some of the most miserable fuckers you'll ever meet.
Yeah, well, look at the guy. I mean, first of all, they're winning when they're kids. They're basically kids, right? So
Yeah.
they're basically reading comic books and winning. So, it's not a deep thought exercise. But as it goes on, watch them, it gets harder and harder, because there's more and more people weighing in on what's working for them. And I think they start to believe it. I don't think it's really so much an age thing. I think they just make the thing more complex than it needs to be. And I have this feeling like, to me, so there's a story about these two Alaskan dudes, and one's an atheist and one's a believer, and they're sitting in a bar and they're telling stories about their explorations of Alaska. And the atheist is telling the story, and he's like, so there I was. The blizzard's closing in. I'm certainly going to die. My dogs are all dead. I've got nothing to eat. I'm freezing my ass off. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, but I prayed. Well, now he's got the believer's attention. The believer leans in. He says, you prayed? He goes, yeah, hell yeah, I did. What else was I going to do? I prayed. I said, God, if you exist and you save my wretched soul, well, I promise I'll never doubt your existence again. And the believer says, well, so you believe then? You're here. You made it. You believe. And the atheist says, it wasn't God. It was two Inuits who showed up and helped me get home. Right? We fit the experience to our narrative.
Yep.
That's what we do. And so, if it's through some complex thinking or whatever, we say it's through, if a guy goes to school for 20 years and he's a coach, he's going to be believing this, it's all this scholastic stuff that matters. Right? I talk to some of these coaches on Twitter, these guys, I mean, they all seem to be in the UK and they all seem to have PhDs, Alex. What is up with that?
Oh, no comment.
Yeah.
We're both going to be guilty.
Yeah.
You guys are the most overeducated lot I've ever seen, And so I say something to them, like some shit like this. I'll say like, dude, it's just not about letting kids play. And they'll come back to me with asking for credentials.
Yeah.
Or, saying, no, it's much more complex than that. It's a fucking game. It really can't be that complex.
Yeah. Sometimes we make things seem a lot more important than they are, a lot more complicated than they are.
But it runs deep though, because, if they could, and I remember you telling me this, Tim, one of the first times we met, if there were coaches out there that were marketing to, teach babies how to walk, you could bet your life on it that would also be a successful thing, rather than just let the kid try it out, trial and error, take its own unique approach on life. I mean, we're just creating a bunch of robots.
Yeah.
And you see it in everything, if I take, for example, like the ice hockey situation here in Switzerland, and guys no one's that individual, no one's trying the things that would really make the game stand still and maybe create this opportunity to win the game. They're just always playing a system, and then all these talented young kids, when they leave a team that is predominantly system based, where they have to be somewhere and they have to make this pass if they're in this situation, when they go and play in a team that's free, they don't know how to play anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's you break it down to something as simple as kids just going out and playing. They couldn't do anything unless it was an organized play date.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, Alex and I have talked about this a lot, but when I grew up, we were just locked out of the house.
Yeah.
That's how I played tennis, because there was a park. We played all the sports. And we met every day after school and early on the weekends, and we played and played and played, and nobody taught us anything. And there was like one of those guys, I went on to play tennis. There was two guys there that went on to play Major League Baseball. And nobody taught us anything. And now you look at the landscape and it's all like factory coaching. Like the first thing they do is plug their kids into one of those, strip mall based baseball academies where they teach you to get down on one knee and they're just like Alex said, they're just little robots.
Yep. Yeah. I get, go on. I'm sorry.
No, go on.
It's in my area. It's a really wealthy area, and we have people teaching 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds baseball, like instructions, lessons. Same thing with basketball, lessons, instructions. I have people asking me to give their kids running lessons, and they want speed lessons. They want personal training at that age. And I tell them, I said, I'm just go outside and have them fucking run. Like, have them do some hill sprints, have them do push-ups, pull-ups, some lunges, some squats if they want to, but let them fucking go out and play. Like, what more do they need to do? Just have them do it every day. Like, it's not that complicated to get some of these kids in shape.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But we're just not in that kind of society right now. You know, what I mostly deal with, like I was saying with the Spanish system, but mostly what'll happen is a parent will come to me and they'll say, well, gee, do you think little Billy can be, you know, like a professional player? Well, first of all, he's like 10 years old, right? I have no idea. I don't know this kid. I mean, you know what they're thinking, what people are thinking is it's all technique. That's what they're thinking. That if we just get the technique, then everything takes care of itself. But, you know, my point is that the technique is one of 1,000 things, maybe 10,000 things. And I don't know anything about these guys. But they'll go to another coach who plays to that system. He says, well, here's what's going to happen. Here, Billy will hit 10,000 balls a day. He'll improve at 2% a month, and blah blah blah. Some other bullshit that sounds like a real metric to people because they're mostly engineers now. And they're like, okay, we're going to put Billy in here. And Billy normally dies on the vine.
Yep.
Because he needs more attention. It's more personal than that. You know, there's like one guy that comes out of all these systems, and everybody says like, well, I'm going over to Joe's system because he produced this player. And my question was always like, well, yeah, but there's 500 people in Joe's system and only one guy got any good, which means he has a 99.99% fail rate, right?
So do you coach any professional tennis players? Do you coach any professional athletes, or did you?
Yeah, but nobody really any good. And normally, so these things are team taught now. So I'm only brought in usually on special circumstances. So maybe for a series of matches for some strategic advice or things like that. But they always have a strength guy and a technical guy.
Yeah.
And now everybody has a mental guy. Like, I don't even know what that is. Like, that's the job I want because that guy does nothing.
Yeah. So I'm actually a part of one of those teams with a couple of different guys, and there's this huge disconnect. And I keep telling people always ask me, you know, what if I want to train professional athletes, what should I do? I said, become a sport coach. And they say, why do that? I said, well, if you're a sport coach, the easy part is learning the personal training aspect of it. Like the fitness component, that's cake. Like, you're interested in that, you'll learn it. But the only way you're really going to have the 100% hands-on approach or the hands-on control on these guys is if you're the 100% skill coach. And then you have control over everything rather than having all these little pieces that you got to fit together. Like, just like you said, it's a team of people to coordinate, and it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I think it's really impossible, to tell you the truth, because the guy who always has their ear in most disciplines is the technique guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you sit with a tennis player and you say like, look, you know, you just got to survive, you know, like when I started getting back into coaching a little bit, it was a few years ago. Like, so I only coached at that recreational level for a long time because those guys are way more fun to deal with. And so I got brought in on a special case for this guy, and he was playing in some tournaments. He was doing pretty good, young guy. And then he got into it. He was playing up against Roddick. He went up against Roddick. And so I hadn't really watched Andy Roddick play much. And so I watched him play, and the guy that I was helping with he had a huge game. His game was just enormous. And I figured like all he had to do was survive Roddick's serve, you know, just get it back into the court, and then he would probably win the point. So I came up with this catchy little thing for him, right? Serve plus one. Just get it back. I knew he was going to hold serve all the time. He has a huge serve, and Roddick doesn't return very well. So he just needed a break. So I told him, serve plus one. Just think that. Just block that serve back into play, and then you'll figure it out from there. But the technical guy had his ear.
Yeah.
And it was all about some technique and some thing he had to do, and you know, some spin competition or something like this. It was really complicated, and the guy never really gave my plan a shot. And it happens. There's just this, I don't know if it's a human thing or it's just a resistance to simplicity at almost every level.
Yeah.
I mean, when you coach a football player and they know every stat there is, right? Like they know their 40 time, they know their splits on just about everything. And so they're thinking about this from this like pure speed metric. But really all I have to do, there's a lot of ways to simulate speed. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you just say, look, you just have to find a way to get over there at the time you need to get there.
Yep.
You know, that's all we're talking about. Maybe it's not running. Maybe you just need to shake the defender a little quicker, or maybe you need to miss the bump.
That's
right?
exactly right. So one of my receivers, his name is Chris Hogan. And when he was with the New England Patriots, the first year he was there when they won the Super Bowl, he led the NFL in yards of separation. Right. So what that means is I think he had like 3.6 yards of separation on average between him and the person defending him. Now, he was labeled as like a number 3 that time, so they had the worst person guarding him. But he runs like a 4.6 that year. Like he wasn't blazing fast. He's not he's not like insanely strong, and he's not an incredible route runner. But what did he do? He just got to where he was supposed to be before that person did in a more efficient manner. So you don't have to run full speed to get there. You just have to get there more efficiently. And however you got to do it, that's the win.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But you see, that's very dissatisfying for people who are locked into metrics.
Yes.
They want to know how, specifically how. And when you say like, I don't fucking know how, well, that's right. That's dissatisfying. And to the receiver too, if they get into this thing, you say like, hey, look, we're just going to figure out a way to get you over there when you need to be there. Well, how? I don't know how. We'll figure it out. That's what we're doing here. No, they want they want, like Alex was saying, they want a 5-step plan. Well, you're going to have pasta for breakfast, right? And then you're going to have 2 beers for lunch, and then we're going to run a 100-yard dash. Oh, okay. Right. And obviously, I'm kidding about that, but only kind of, because you know how specific these people get. You know, they write down like, there's this method I don't quite understand yet, but for CrossFitters, there's this method they're using to measure themselves in between workouts and determine whether they get enough sleep and enough exercise. And I mean, I can't imagine living a life like that.
You know, have you ever pondered on the reason why, Tim, that you know, people are like that they, you know, that there just needs to be a way or a how or a technique or a prescription to just, you know, to get better? Have you ever pondered on that a little bit? Because to me, the only thing it comes down to is people they hate the idea that they have this like lack of certainty, you know? Then there'd be like no excuse to not do this. You know what I mean? Like they just cannot deal with that.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, this is a debate I've had, I mean, a billion times in my life. You take so if I'm a lawyer and you come to me and I give you a very simple answer, you'll pay me $5,000 for that. But if you're a professional athlete and you come to me and I give you a very simple answer, you reject it.
Yeah.
You want a super complicated answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, it speaks to what we're saying about how people view these things, right? There has to be a technique. And I think it's even worse for pro athletes because they know deep inside that the margin between them and the next guy is like microscopic.
Yeah.
And it's hard for them to live with that. And so they want a narrative that tells them, I'm doing these 5 things, and that separates me from Rafael Nadal.
Yeah, but it's also the perspective that these athletes have and their narrative, because a lot of them, one of the, you know, and it's not all of them, but, you know, a good portion of them, the reason why they're so good at what they do is they have a drive and a hunger to keep training and to keep competing because there's some other lack, or they're sort of they're rewarding their system, like, you know, so if they're winning, they're getting more love from their parents, they're getting more attention, you know, or I am somebody if I become this or not, you know, like a lot of these really, you know, outstanding athletes that have, you know, some you know, deep psychological issues going on. It's not to say that, you know, there's something good or bad about that. It's just, it is what it is. You know, it takes a motivated person to be, you know, doing what these guys are doing all the time. You know what I mean? So that's why it must seem like, you know, it's very hard for them to sort of just chuck it all up in the air, be free, go for it, and, like, you know, not hold on to the whole weight of the world. And, you know, I need to get this performance. I need to step on the podium. I need to get gold. Otherwise, this has all been a waste, you know, and I'm a waste. And you know what I mean? It just spirals on and on and on. Like, the reason why these people are doing what they're doing, you know, a lot of people look at it from the outside and think it's all, you know, glamorous and cool. But, you know, you start digging deep into these guys' lives, you see a lot of pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you are right now. You're dealing with that on a more regular basis than I am. I don't know that I ever get that deep, you know, with people. You sort of see it, but, you know, it's like I'm watching this thing on Netflix with Jordan, The Last Dance, you know?
How good is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's super fun to watch, but you realize that, you know, here's the conundrum of that whole thing. So the most interesting guy in that story to me is Phil Jackson,
Oh
who
yeah.
he gets the least amount of time in the show, but he took all these personalities and melded them into a team. And he didn't just do it once, he did it twice. He did it in Los Angeles too. And so he has this saying for the last season, and the saying is, you can only be considered successful when you've committed on the completion of a successful act, like in the day, right? And here's Jordan now talking about something that happened 30 years ago. That's his life. And I don't know anything about Michael Jordan personally. I've never met the guy. I don't think I know anybody who knows him. But I've heard through the grapevine that he's just not, he doesn't have that focus in his life anymore, right? That he sort of peaked 30 years ago. That he's, you know, not feeling that sort of intensity about life anymore. And this speaks to what you're saying about the importance of winning. I think that guy was so freaking good that he was fine without worrying about winning.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
No, yes.
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? I want to hear more on that. I was just thinking when you were saying that.
Well, like, to win. So, I mean, play is play, right? We play to play. That's how people get into sport.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for pros because they make a living on it, but it's not that much different. They're still playing a game. But when you play to win something, right? When you do something for the end result, the thing that separates you from the end result is the play. So you're actually playing against play when you play to win.
So you don't.
It's not supposed. Go ahead.
You don't think that he needed to win? You just think he needed to play?
Yeah, I think he might have been better, if that's even possible, if he wasn't so worried about winning. Like, for example, you work with some baseball players, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you put a hit and run on. At that moment, the guy has to swing at anything. He doesn't have to look for his pitch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How many times does that guy get a nice hit on a pitch that shouldn't be hit because he has to swing? It's not even his fault anymore. You can blame the coach.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, all the pressure's off.
Pressure's off. Right, exactly. And that pressure is an artificial construct. Disagree? Agree?
No, no,
I'm
no, no.
smiling.
Yeah, I see. That's what sucks about the cameras being off. I'm with it. That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, that's we all just put this fake. I mean, even in the aspect of life, we put this fake pressure on ourselves. I mean, right now, I have enough money where I can do absolutely nothing for, probably, I don't know, 5, 8 years, do absolutely nothing and live the same exact lifestyle, right? I can just chill out and do nothing, but yet I'm still working 70 hours a week, 80 hours. I'm doing something 80 hours a week almost while in quarantine. Why? Right?
Yeah.
There's what am I fucking chasing? Like it's and I feel pressure. Right? Brooker and I talk about this all the time. So it's like, is this the rat race? What are we, and maybe it's a rat race, maybe it's not, but we're putting a pressure on us when there's no fucking pressure. I mean, you said you could live with a family of 4 or a family of 5 in a camper, $1,500 a month or $1,500 a week. Do you say month or week?
Month.
$1,500 a month, no problems. Travel the fucking world at your leisure, whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want. That sounds like living like a king to me. And if I lived like that at $1,500 a month, bro, I could go on for probably 30 years.
Yeah. And not only that, we were doing it on like the world's most beautiful beaches.
Yep.
It's the narrative. It's like you're not supposed to be happy. You know, two guys run into each other. How's it going, boss? And all shit. You know, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you were to say like, oh my God, my life is great, just doing nothing, and they're like, they look at you with like, what are you talking about? First of all, you're not supposed to say that, even if you are doing it. Yeah, and I mean, that's a part of a much bigger narrative in terms of the choices people make with their lives and why they make them. I mean, you know, Alex has probably told you, but I'm convinced that one of the big purposes of school is to hypnotize children at an early age to pursue that. It's very difficult to let go of, you know. I mean, always everything has a purpose, and homework and these things and grades, and you know, and the purpose of kindergarten is first grade, and the purpose of first grade is second grade, and it's not long before you're like, you've just, you know, only live in 20 years from now.
Yeah.
It's not even tomorrow anymore. It's 20 years from now.
I know.
And the fucked up thing with schooling is that it's based off the Prussian system, which was to make obedient people for the state.
Yep.
You know, and you know, we talk about these people that want these prescriptions and techniques. Well, since they were children, they were told that this person, you know, knows, you know, more than you, and you need to listen to them about something that actually they probably don't have a fucking clue about. I mean, all the, you know, no offense, there's some great teachers out there, and I've had some wonderful teachers, you know, who I'm still very good friends with today. But a lot of the people that I met at university that become teachers, they were fucking losers that, you know, didn't have anything else they wanted to do.
Yeah. And you know, to defend the educational system on this end as well, like I don't necessarily think it's a deliberate, right? It's not a deliberate act to keep a hypnosis going. I think that's a byproduct of a lagging system, right? I don't think there's any necessary malice behind it. But I don't disagree that it's a hindrance. And that's why I'm so fascinated by you. There's this movie, Captain Fantastic, where the guy literally does the exact same fucking thing that you do. Something happened to his wife, so he says, "Fuck this, we're going off the grid and we're going to live our life." And that concept is so appealing to me because, I mean, even at a young age, I remember when it was just my father and I going to the batting cages, we would go and we would hit, and we wouldn't judge each round, right? There's 20 pitches in the round. Oh, that was a good round. That was a bad round. We never did it, right? We just went, work on this. Okay, that's it. And we didn't even say good day, bad day. Didn't even say, we just went and we fucking hit. Hey, keep your eye on the ball. Whatever the hell it was, right? He gave a simple cue and it wasn't anything outrageous. Then when I was in high school, I was a freshman and I went with a senior, and the senior was struggling and I was doing well. And I said, hey, let's go to the cages. Let's just go hit. So he came out of the cage. He goes, that was a good round, right? Since then, since that fucking day, I judged
Yeah.
rounds.
Yeah.
I never judged fucking rounds before in my life. So, I mean, I talk to my girlfriend now about homeschooling kids, our kids, strictly because I don't want them diluted by all these fucking monkeys, by everyone else running around. So I hear what you're saying. I just don't think it's deliberate. I think I think it's just a byproduct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we agree. I don't think it's deliberate either.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we live a bunch of societal lies because it's good for society. I mean, you know, when the kids were really young, it occurred to me, we're teaching them please and thank you. That's a form of brainwashing. That's a societal lie, right? Why please and thank you? They don't fucking care. They're little kids. They just, in a little kid's eyes, you're there to feed them. That's your job, right? You don't need to say please and thank you for that, but it greases the wheels and it makes the world appear to be a much nicer place. And that's important. To your point, it makes the world nicer. Having kids say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in the United States, that's a guard against insurrection. That makes the country more stable. It's a form of brainwashing, but it's good brainwashing. We benefit from that. And the countries that don't do things like that are far less stable. So yeah, I don't think there's any malice in it, but it can go too far.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're dealing with. We know now that what's going to happen, if nothing else, the recent series of events have told us that we need to be more adaptive in the future.
Yeah.
But school is about everything but adaptation. School is about following orders, right?
Yep.
And the problem now is that conformity has gotten such this point. It's that when conformity is the goal, only the most conforming can rise to the top. And so we don't have leaders or teachers or coaches who can invent things. We have guys who've been spent their whole life following orders themselves.
Yeah.
They're not, you don't get to be a leader by jumping through hoops your whole life. I mean, that's the exact opposite of leadership.
Yeah,
Coaches, to me,
sorry,
they're
Tim.
leaders. It's okay. Coaches are leaders. We have to look out and take a shot. But it's always the safe play. I mean, to me, the technique is chosen often because it's the most obvious and it's the safest. And you notice how everybody pretty much chooses the same technique. I'm watching guys teach fielders and probably some football players. Should I start with the right foot or the left foot? You know, right foot drop, left foot drop. And so, I mean, what a stupid thing to argue about. Right? I mean, but that's where we are in the game. And it's because it's safe and it's a recognized language and it makes you look like you're not crazy, right? But if you show up at like an NFL complex and you say like, look, I don't think you guys need to worry about winning so much, and I think you just need to get to your mark a little bit, you know, however you want to do it more quickly than you were doing it before, they write you off as some sort of fucking hippie mumbo jumbo. But I think we're more right about it than the rest of than the structured viewpoint is.
Why do you think that?
Well, because that's how it always starts. It always starts like, for example, Bjorn Borg, very iconoclastic player. They said, you just can't play tennis that way. That guy won 11 Grand Slams. They said the same thing about McEnroe. And they said the same thing about Connors. And they said the same thing about Dan Marino, right? The guy doesn't really, look how he throws the ball. I mean, after you saw it happen, then they start teaching that method. Well, we'll teach that method now because it seems to work.
Yeah.
It always starts with some weird guy showing up doing something that people didn't think was. How about the Fosbury flop?
You know, I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone explain that to me. I'm a pleb.
The Fosbury flop. It was, you know, before I'm not sure what. I know that his surname was Fosbury, but it was for the high jump.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Dick
yes. My bad. I know exactly what that is.
Yeah, and his coaches, even though he could clear higher distances with the flop, his coaches made him do it the normal way. Right? So if he got 3 jumps out of meet, if he cleared the required distance, they would make him do the proper way until he cleared the required distance. And then if he did on the 3rd one, they'd let him like do the flop.
Yep.
And newspapers picked it up. You can still see the articles in the newspapers. It looks like he's having a seizure. It looks like this. That guy changed high jumping.
Yep. Yeah. I did you ever see the movie Bucket List with Jack Nicholson and who's Morgan Freeman?
Yeah, I saw that a long time ago.
Okay. So Morgan Freeman asked Jack Nicholson, so you don't believe in God, so 95% of the people on earth are wrong? And Jack Nicholson looks at him and says, if life has taught me anything, it's that 95% of the people are always wrong. And that's something I live by. Like if I find myself going with the crowd, I immediately pause, take a step back and be like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah, I think that's a super important point. And I'm also not saying like I'm right when I say this stuff. I'm saying this is my observation. I'm certain that there's moments where really specific technique is needed, but it's just not to the degree that I see it prescribed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we always our goal is always to err on their side. Like when you become convinced that giving, handicapping people with these really specific structures isn't working for them, it seems to me you want to always start with the most minimally invasive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which is how they feel about the game, but when you ask a guy like, when you ask a very good player, like, what do you feel when you play? I often hear like, I don't feel anything. I feel like I'm just trying to execute these commands, like I'm a big program. And I don't know this to be a fact, but I do not think that's what it's like inside of a great tennis like Roger Federer's head. I just think it's silent. I think he's just playing.
Yeah,
Not always.
It's like he's dancing.
Yeah. It's like a big dance for everybody who's doing what they do. I think it's just too fast for thought. I mean, a pitch gets on a batter in 3/100ths of a second. You're not forming thoughts in 3/100ths of a second.
Well, if you are, you're fucked.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just that's the nature of the thing, and it's back to Alex's point, right? We just can't accept it. We need to have more certainty.
Yeah. It's a shame when we get caught in these patterns, and it's like superstitions, right? It's just a pattern. Like that's all we're looking for. We're looking for consistency because we all want predictability, right? So by having the form, by having the technique, by having everything down, it makes it easier. It makes, and especially if everyone else is doing it. If everyone else is doing it and you fail, hey, tough sledding, right? But if you start doing it different from someone else, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot because there's uncertainty. It's away from the crowd, and people, we just want certainty. We just want to know, why do I want to make X amount of dollars? Well, because I know if I just take this X amount of dollars and put it into some kind of CD or put it into some kind of bond, I can yield X% on it. And then I know I can live on this amount of money for the rest of my life, no problem, right? We just want certainty. We don't like uncertainty. So to go against the grain is very scary to people.
But then when you get to this point, nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question starts coming down to is, what's the big worry about in the first place? Most of this shit, it really just doesn't matter. The world existed for a hell of a long time before we got here. It's probably going to exist for a long time afterwards. And even if it does, or even if it don't, or even if this is one big simulation, none of it fucking matters.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I mean, it's like, so you deal with a professional athlete, right? And you say, okay, so Mike, you deal with a receiver. And you say to the receiver, you start off and you say like, okay, so if I could have told you 20 years ago that you'd be in the NFL, you would have been what? Thrilled to death, right? Well, then why aren't you fucking thrilled to death right now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? Because it's a retreating target. It's always running away from you. It's always going and going and going and going. And to your point earlier, like there's this old saying about you're safe to fail with IBM. You know the saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know that, Tim. What's that?
So it's an old business school thing. It's safe to fail with IBM. So if there's a problem in the company and I hire IBM to consult, even if it fucks up and blows up in my face, I'm not going to get fired because it was the sensible move.
Yeah, it's a blue chip
But if
stock.
Okay.
I hire somebody I don't know, some crazy thing, right? And it goes wrong, that decision is probably going to cost me my job.
Yep.
And so there's a disincentive to taking chances. And there's a guy, an FBI negotiator, and his name is, I think his last name is Boss. I think it's Richard Boss, but I'm not sure. But he's a really interesting cat. And I listened to the guy talk a few times, and he's the world's most successful hostage negotiator. And his first move, his observation on people was that they're not afraid to fail, but they're afraid to fail in unique ways.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And so his first move with anybody when he was brought in was to get to the loss, to get to the thing they're most afraid of and work up from there. Once you get the fear out in the open, well, it's a different animal. Now you know what you're dealing with. But how many times you deal with somebody and they don't tell you what they're afraid of, and then like 6 months later you found out and you're like, why didn't you just tell me to start with?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not just losing. It's not this. It's not just being, having another player take your position in the NFL or in baseball. There's something other than that. It's something deeper than that. And sometimes they don't know it. Alex, this is your gig, yeah?
Yeah, sometimes they don't know it, but you start sort of prodding it, and people very quickly show if they're willing to be brave to sort of look in or not. And you can't, this is something that you can't really force. It's completely up to the person if they want to start shining light on this or not. So, but the reasons why people are doing things, I mean, if you're very, even things that look great and they get a lot of, sort of positive social recognition for, if you start, going deeper into this very quickly, it can be very enlightening for people, especially for the, for me, or say for you, Tim. I know you've done this with people too. You learn so much also about, you see patterns for yourself too in what other people are doing. And sometimes it takes, hearing from someone else to for you to sort of see it in your own life too.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't get to it through yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to see it in other people. I mean, I think it's like you're drawn to coaching, I think, because you're just fascinated by the human mess.
The human what?
The human mess.
That's what I thought you said.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's the fascinating part. And you watch people. So I was that person, right? When I was a younger player, I did the same stuff. And so I'm just telling people, and to me, all roads lead to Rome. All disciplines are the same. I don't need to understand the nuts and bolts of every sport specifically to deal with every sport, because you're not really dealing with the specifics of a sport. You're dealing with a person interfacing with that sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't make plays for the NFL. I don't know it that well, but I can certainly help people deal with the stresses of their position.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time they get there, they already know everything about every move. It's not the moves, it's not the technique, it's not that they're becoming technically inefficient. They're just struggling, right, with the uncertainty of it all. They've lost perspective. Like I said, you start anybody off with like, okay, you are standing where you were dreaming of standing 20 years ago. What's the problem?
Yeah. Now all of a sudden you have no idea what to do. Right? And you're at the apex, you're at the pinnacle of where you thought you would be, and you're clueless. That doesn't make sense. I had a guy, I had a receiver that was a 10+ year receiver come in, and he looked at one of my other guys and say, "Yo, you got to get me like that." I said, "What are you, out of your fucking mind? You don't want to be anything like that." I said, "Hell no. Like, you want to be like you. You're the gold standard. You're what it should be. Not that." Like, that's what's going through your head? How are you forgetting who you are?
Yeah, but it's brutal for some of these guys, because they're dreaming and they're fighting for something and killing themselves day in and day out for something that they think that when they get it, they're never going to have a problem again. And then sometimes they get what they wanted, and then maybe the satisfaction is short-lived, or maybe for a little bit longer. But sometimes then the dragon rears its head, and then they're like, well, hang on, this was meant to have sort of, checkmate. I'm meant to have finished this. I'm not meant to be feeling like this anymore. And then it can end up becoming, what they thought was a blessing, it can end up becoming a curse. But the good point to that then is that then there's the opportunity to actually understand it and overcome it. But it's, it's brutal for some people, mate. It's really
hard. I think it is, yeah. And that's the mystery to me, because they've been fighting, and I use that word fighting loosely. I don't mean they're fighting, but they're fighting for something their whole life. And then it's as if they think that when they get to this spot, the fight's going to end.
Yep.
And if that's how they got there, the fight never ends. And from my perspective, it's like, this is what you want your life to be like every day of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be, you want every day to be driven towards some purpose, to fight for something, right? This is why I'm hearing stories about Jordan struggling a little bit. And I don't mean like it's some deep existential angst struggle. I'm just saying he misses having that something to fight for every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's absolute regret in his eyes by retiring early too. Absolutely. By not continuing to do that. I mean, obviously hindsight's always 2020, but I mean, when people don't have the struggle anymore, it's boring. Do you ever see that Twilight Zone episode of The Compulsive Gambler? And
I don't think I did.
So old school one.
Yeah, I love that show.
He was a compulsive gambler, lost his wife, kids, the whole nine, and then he went to hell. Right? In Twilight, he went to hell essentially, where every time he gambled, every time he played blackjack, it was always blackjack. Every time he played roulette, he always hit the number. And by the end of it, he says, all he wanted to do was lose, because he couldn't take he couldn't take knowing the future. It was the uncertainty that made it so alluring. It wasn't the certainty in it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, that's great.
This reminds me of and Tim, I know you like Alan Watts. Mike, do you know who Alan Watts is?
Maybe you gotta remind me.
He's like, sort of I guess the best way to say it is sort of like a philosopher that mixed sort of, Eastern and some part of Western philosophy together. He's got some fantastic lectures and speeches, and for sure you've heard some of his stuff on different videos on YouTube and stuff. But he he has this famous part about, you know, dreaming. And it's like, you know, if you could dream any dream you would want to dream, you know, you would have these dreams where you become a, you know, a superhero, and everything you would ever want could happen. And, you know, you'd even probably start dreaming about, you know, negative things and bad things and live through that too. But then if you kept dreaming a new dream over and over again, you would eventually dream the life you're living exactly now, which is one of, you know, uncertainty and, you know, sort of this ability to sort of mold things with the way you would want. I've definitely butchered it a little bit, but it's a great speech that you should listen to once, because it really reminds me of that. We don't want the things that we think we want. It's just always endless. You know, I need pleasure and I want to stay away from pain.
Yep.
And that's not it. That's not what it's really not what we want.
What's the speech called? The Dream of Life?
The Dream of Life. That's it. That's
okay.
it. Even if you got it there, is it like a couple minutes long? It's not long.
It's 3 minutes 39 seconds long.
Dude, play it.
No, I don't think we can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not ours.
It's great. Listen to it afterwards. It's fucking awesome. And after that, listen to the Chinese farmer, the parable of the Chinese farmer. That's a fucking awesome one too from him. That's a short one.
Yeah, and all those stories exist, right? They exist to point to this problem that we deal with people. And like I said in the beginning, I'm convinced, really, through thousands of conversations, that everybody just wants to have more fun playing the game they play.
Yeah.
That's really what we're supposed to be doing. And so, you know, when they say I need to get here faster, you say like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. What do you really want?
Yeah.
If I had a magic wand right now and I could just do anything you want for you, well, they go like, why do you want to win? Well, in the end, if you keep drilling down, you'll find it's more fun.
Yep.
It's more fun.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree. I have this one NBA player, Kevin Love, who's been playing forever, right?
Yeah, I know he is.
And when I first started training him, within 4 or 5 days of me working with him, he said to his trainer, or he said to his coach, he goes, "Man, I feel like me again." And he was happy, right? And by feeling like me again, it was him doing whatever the hell he wanted to do on the court. It was fun for him to play. He was able to move without pain. Like and the game became more fun instantly because there was no negative association with it at that point.
Yeah, I honestly feel when we get to the players at the highest levels, they've lost sight of why they're doing it.
100%.
And they're just looking for those little technical things that they think will bring it back to them, but that's not the way to go. They're digging in the wrong cave. And so you just get it back to unstructured play. I mean, you know, like I told Alex when we first met that I wanted Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I stick by that. Like, I could change Tiger Woods' life. He's got more wins in him. There's no doubt. I'm sure his body hurts, but he's got more. He's struggled with the passion for golf. You can see it. And it's not going to come back through hitting more golf balls.
Yeah.
If there was ever a guy who needed a break in between tournaments and stuff, right? Just away from the nice yacht, away from all this crap. And it was another reason I was saying earlier, I took my kids out. I wanted my kids to grow up in a tent for a period of their life, because that's a good zero starting point. If you bring them up in a mansion, where do they go from there?
Yeah.
Everything's expected. It's like, oh yeah, I've had this before. But you teach them to be tough, and you teach them to go through seasons, and you know, they come out different people. You get Tiger Woods or anybody like him away from all that shit they deal with, people taking care of them and everything, right? I think in the end, deep inside, at a subconscious level, there's a loss of personal respect when people do everything for you. And I think that percolates up to your performance. There's just a subtle loss of the feeling of ability. There's a question now. When you were younger and hungry, could you do anything? Yeah, I do anything. But now people do so much shit for you, and so much of your life is taken care of. Can you do anything? I'm not sure. I haven't done anything in a long time.
Yeah.
And I think,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, sorry, Tim, but it makes you think about, you know, different guys. I mean, say for example, you know, one of the first ones that comes to mind is say like someone like Conor McGregor, you know, come on, and you know, he was hungry. You know, this hunger in guys is the thing that really sparks and drives them. And then also all of a sudden, when they get to somewhere where, you know, that they don't need to worry about putting food on the table, and they, you know, they don't need to worry about recognition, and they don't need to worry about, you know, some of these other sort of basic requirements that we need. They're just unable to perform anymore, because it was driven from you know, these underlying desires. You understand what I mean? Rather than this sense of trying to discover freedom in what they're doing. I think there's a very big difference.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also not suggesting it's the most healthiest perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the drive's a little unhealthy. I think, you know, an example that comes to my mind is Jimmy Connors. That guy was unhealthily competitive. Like, he would fuck over anybody to win a match. Even when he was playing in the seniors, you know, beyond professional teams. These guys are supposed to be his friends, right? No. When you are on the court with a guy like Connors, it's a dangerous place to be.
So
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What's your struggle now? You personally, right? Like you're pretty chilled out. You go wherever you want, however you want, whenever you want, and you have your family, right? What's your struggle?
You mean outside of being broke?
Okay then. But yeah, I mean,
I know.
you could make money if you wanted, right? Like you know the formula. It's not that tough.
No, there's stuff I want to do. So, you know, my oldest just turned 18. So there's a few events going on. My wife and daughter went back to the States. My daughter had to have hernia surgery, and she wanted to do it in the States. They've been over there for about 6 months, and they want to stay up there. And when they left, I was left with 2 teenage boys, and one who was about to turn 18. The other one's 17. And for the last, 15 years, I've been a parent. Number one job, a parent. When my daughter wasn't there, I could feel change.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent anymore, really. I just keep them in between the poles now, if you know what I mean. And so then, that's a change of life. It's another chapter, it's actually another act. It's not even a chapter, it's another act. And I've been keeping up with coaching. I mean, I've been watching the research and thinking and writing about it, and helping people occasionally. And when you pop into, say, I worked in Sucre, Bolivia for 3 months. When you pop into a program, it doesn't really plumb the depths of your knowledge. It's not that complicated. It wasn't that challenging. It was fun, but it wasn't that challenging. So
Yeah.
I wanted to get back into it. And so I started writing a lot more, and bugging Alex with the stuff I'm writing. And that's my challenge, is to get it all out, to get it formulated in a way that it even makes sense to me. I sometimes drift with it, and that's really my fight every day, is to get this organized and get it to people and have people contribute and use it on people and watch people get better with it. Because it's a very simple system, but like I said, this guy Fred Shoemaker, he goes all over the place. He never advertises. He's full all the time. And if you listen to talk to people who go to David Ledbetter, you know who he is?
Nope.
He's a big time. He coached Tiger Woods and stuff for a while, so he's a big time golf coach. And if you talk to people to go to his seminars, they say like, well, you know, the Ledbetter system, I hit the ball better because of the Ledbetter system. But when you talk to people who go to Fred's classes, they say, this guy changed my life. Because in the end, what we're talking about is not better ways of doing or other ways of doing. It's about other ways of being.
Mhm.
And that to me is a fascinating perspective. And that really motivates me, you know, because now you're making material changes in people. You're not making them, they're making them, you're facilitating them.
So
if that makes sense.
yeah, so then what's your goal?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I don't want my 18-year-old to end up in prison. That's number one. Yeah, and then it's not, to me, it's not so much goals, right? It's more just a system of getting places. We're going to come back to the States. The kids have to test out of school. We're going to get up something, and then I want to start working with people again in a more, you know, in a more intimate manner, not just giving lessons, but working with people. And I didn't travel before. When we had kids, I stopped traveling entirely because, as you know, this job can take you to places for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And that's not it's not the kind of parent that I want to be. But
Yeah.
now I want to, you know, start picking some projects out again, and because some challenging projects, and I want to participate in that way.
So are you going to continue the same type of lifestyle?
Well, no, I'll probably get a place. I'll never buy a place again. I can promise you that. Never again. But it will be a very simple lifestyle. So any place I get now will be very small. I'll probably keep my camper, but I'll never buy a car again. I mean, my life is, my view on finance and spending and what it takes. Like, for an example, I own less than 50 things. And that includes if you count every fork, spoon, and knife and plate.
That's awesome.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. My possessions take up zero headspace.
Yep.
I owe no money to anybody. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have it any other way again. I'm just not interested in things anymore. I'm just primarily interested in people and experiences. So, not normal, I understand.
It's a great way to be.
And it's deeply, deeply resonating.
Well, it's the opposite of first world life, isn't it? I mean, pretty much everybody who makes a decent salary could be this way in just a few years. And they all know it, but they just don't do it.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And dude, I've been thinking about it for years, and I just won't do it. Too afraid.
Yeah, well then I mean, what's the fear? Right? I mean, in the end, you can always buy your stuff back if you want, if you decide. I actually met a lady. Just before we left, I met this Silicon Valley bigwig lady. And she was telling me, we got to talking in the line. I told her what's going on, and she's like, "Oh my God, I just did the same thing. Like, we were gone for 2 years, and about midway, or no, I'm sorry, she said 1 year, and about, you know, 3/4 of the way through the first year, I'm like, I hate this. I just want to go back to work. And so I came back and bought my stuff. I bought another house and stuff, and went back to work. It's not a fatal decision.
Well, I mean, shit. Look what Brooker did. Look what Alex did. Right? He just went off. 18 months, did his thing, figured some shit out and said, all right, I'm back again.
Yeah, but the figuring this stuff out is the thing, right? I mean, I would say like, so ayahuasca is this big, all the buzz, especially down here now. And then people come down for ayahuasca trips and all this stuff. But even this is another cheat to me. It's another how-to.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
are
agree.
you kind of wrapped around yourself? Come down here and take a drug and you'll be okay, right?
Yep.
You stop your life for a period of time, right? First of all, you'll be very proud of yourself if that's what you want to do. Be very proud of yourself for doing it. And then make a rule for yourself. I'm not changing anything for 6 months, because that's when you're going to change it, because it's just too full. It just feels, everything feels, you have so much time on your hands. What do you do with it? And all this other things just running around in your head. It takes a while for your head to quiet down. And that's when you start figuring stuff out.
Yeah, I would completely agree, Tim. That's
Yeah,
it. It doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. You just need to like slow the fuck down and really limit the amount of stimuli that's coming in through every, sense of your body, and just be alone for a little bit. And that just already gives you so much clarity. It's not about what you're doing or how you do it. None of that. It's just be alone for, significant amount of time, and you're going to start figuring a lot of stuff out about yourself.
yeah, that's it, 100%. It just takes time. At first you're like, you'll take a break and somebody signs a big client. You're like, oh, fuck, man, I'm just totally behind the eight ball. I'm losing everything here.
Yep.
6 months later, you're like, oh, come on. There's like, how many people do I need to make a living? Those people are out there. Right?
Yep.
You need 20 people?
Yeah.
20 people maybe. There's 2,000 people who want to hear what you have to say. I mean, you look at these knuckleheads who sell these systems to people. Here's 10 steps to this and 5 steps to that. And, if it's going to 5, it's going to go to 4 or 3 or 2 or whatever. There's people buying that crap all over the place, and they don't get better. Somebody, an authentic person showing up with like, this is not a system. Yeah, it's amazing to me anyway that people buy into this stuff, because it's not personal. It's just a system I sold to 50 people, right? The first question I ask, if somebody has a system for me, and let's say I'm a business guy, right? And I hire somebody to come in and I go like, did you just sell this system to my competitor? Well, hell yeah, I did. Well, why would I want that fucking system? But when it comes to tennis players and athletes, they're like, okay, I'll do whatever Joey did.
Yep.
You want something personal just for you. This only is going to work for you, because you're going to build the system. I don't have a system. You have it in you. We're going to find it. And it's true in every aspect of their life. You look at somebody, how did you get to be a business bigwig? Well, I went to the school. How did you get to that school? I did these things. Well, there was a lot of other people who did those things that did not get into that school. So how did you do it?
Well, and then there's a lot of people that went to that school that still didn't become bigwigs.
Right. And if you drill down enough, and honestly, it's like any kid will have shown you this. In 3 questions, they can get you to say, I don't know, or lie. Just wait, Alex.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we had that. I think you were one of the first people that I told Tim, and that was I'll never forget that conversation at all. Lying there on the gym floor, destroying my world.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you get to that, and then they start to realize that they really don't know. That so much of their life has been chance encounters, one-of-a-kind events that they never saw coming. And there's no reason to believe that if you're doing the things that feel right to you, that's the sign that you're on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff never happens to somebody who's following somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's the same. I think it's the same throughout. I think it's the same throughout what we do. I think it's the same. I think people want to hear it. And I think they know it. You look at anybody who broke into any league anywhere. I mean, can you think of anybody who, like, does anybody play like Tom Brady? Really?
No.
Do
And
they really?
also it comes down to, I remember reading this in one of the first manuscripts you sent me of your book about the art, the imitation of art. What was that?
Yeah,
What was that story again?
about the guy who made fake Hans von Meegeren.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, that guy. You know that story, Mike?
No, I don't.
So at the end of World War II, the Monuments Men, they drafted the Monuments Men who were museum curators and art experts and stuff, and they sent them to Europe to recollect all of the masterpieces that had been stolen by the Nazis. And so when they got to Goebbels' house, they found these paintings that were supposed to be done by some long dead great artist. I can't remember what the guy's name was. It was shoot, it's escaping me right now. But anyway, they traced the paintings back to this guy named Hans von Meegeren, who was a Dutch citizen, and they charged him with war crimes, and they were going to kill him. And his defense was, those paintings aren't authentic. I forged them. And the judge says, there's no way you forged these things. So I'm going to make you do it, forge another one under witness. And so they brought in all his paints and everything, and he did it. He forged it under witness. And so, first of all, his sentence was reduced to 2 years. But the worst part of all was that all those paintings that had been valued at millions and millions of dollars were now worthless. And as the story goes, when they went, so Joseph Goebbels owned the painting. And when they went to Goebbels and told him that his paintings were a fraud, the guy said it was like Goebbels had witnessed evil for the first time in his life. Yeah, I mean, imitations are worthless. The only difference between those paintings when they were worth millions of dollars and not is that they thought some famous artist had made them.
That's an interesting point. Imitations are worthless.
Yeah, copies are a dime a dozen, literally. That's what Kinko's was based upon. And so, you get people trying to copy. They always want to copy, and you're convincing them to. But it goes back to what you were saying before. It's the unknown. What will it be like if I do it? Right? I mean, I'm always telling players, if I could give you, we can turn this around 2 ways. If I could give you Federer or Nadal's or Serena Williams strokes, well, you'd fuck up just as badly as you are now. You wouldn't play like them.
Yeah.
And inversely, if I could put their brain in your body, once they got accustomed to the total poverty of strokes, they could beat anybody you have lost to with your game.
So do you think something like that, now that's skill acquisition, but do you think something like that would come down to more speed power based athletes too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Let's go track and field. I don't really know it that much, but I have people that I know who race, and they assure me that there's all kinds of tactics in racing.
Yes.
It's not just because Usain Bolt is the fastest, which he is, but there's all kinds of other shit that go in there too.
Yeah, like if I were to run as Usain Bolt, I still wouldn't win a gold medal because there's a strategy that he has that I don't do.
Exactly. I think about, so you guys ever seen Pumping Iron?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so what does Arnold Schwarzenegger do? He meets Lou Ferrigno in the airport. He gets there first, meets Ferrigno in the airport, and he's like, "Oh my God, what's happened to you? You look terrible. You've been sick." He starts working on his head 4 days beforehand. Right? And people go like, "Oh, it's just weightlifting." No, man, those competitions are another form of competition. It's all, and I mean, you see him setting him up. It's great. I love that movie, right? And it gets so bad that Ferrigno's dad tries to isolate him from Schwarzenegger. Leave him alone, Arnold. Leave him alone. What do you look so wrong with him? Do we need to take him to a doctor?
We need another podcast like this with just you doing your Arnold voice too. This is class. Tim, mate, thank you so much for your time, mate. We gotta wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. Oh wow, a lot of fun. Mike, nice
Man.
meeting you.
Likewise, bro. I hope you come stateside soon because I'd love to fucking meet you, and I'd love to do you and Alex do this in person one of these days because I have a feeling that this would be a 6-hour fucking podcast.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, I think when the virus dies down here, I think probably a couple months we'll be starting to head back.
And what are you gonna do? Drive back?
No, I don't think I can because I think everybody's mandating this 2-week quarantine.
Yeah.
So I got 16 countries to go through. That would be that'd take like a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. At least.
Yeah, I think so. I think we park the truck here at this ranch for a little bit, and I fly back and then get things set up and go from there.
Yep. Cool, man. Tim, it's always a pleasure, mate. And just, I'm so grateful we met on that lovely Costeño beach up the top there. And
That's weird, huh?
it's just
Small
mad, man.
world.
It's mad.
Small world.
Yeah.
So Tim, where can everyone find you? Do you want people to find you?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, go to clunkmonkey.com.
What is spell that?
CLUNKMONKEY.
Okay. Clunkmonkey.com, huh? Is that your website?
Yeah, there's stuff about the trip up there, and then I put coaching stuff up there now, and so that's kind of like my general gathering for information at this point.
Yeah, there's some great posts on there. There's some really good stuff on there.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes too.
Okay, good. And then when I get back, we'll hook up. And then
Absolutely.
Where do you live, Mike?
I'm in Jersey, so
okay.
I'm on the other side of the country.
Yeah, that's just a short plane ride if there's flights ever again.
Well, we're hoping by December, January, right, Brooker?
Yeah, we are. Yes, we are. And I'm hoping too, Tim, because knowing you, if you have to drive back, it'll be 30 years before you end up back in the US.
Yeah.
So, yeah, mate. Listen, Tim, look after yourself, mate. Send my love to everyone.
Will do. Best of luck with your upcoming adventures, and thanks for everything. Nice meeting you, Mike.
Right on, man. Likewise. I'll catch you soon,
Tim.
brother.
We'll speak soon.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers, fella.
Cheers.